Hello, everyone, and welcome to the PolyColumbus video podcast series. This is our very first episode talking about the organization's foundation. PolyColumbus has actually been around for about 15 years, so we're going to talk a bit about the earlier years of the organization, what worked, what didn't, and what we've been doing over the last year or so to really take the organization to the next level. So my name's Neil Winneman. I'm the chair of the board of directors for PolyColumbus. Been with the organization for about a year and a half, and we'll be hearing stories from far before my time. So actually, I'll just toss out to the panel who has been part of PolyColumbus the longest.
I think that would probably be me. I've been a part of PolyColumbus for the last 11 years. Before it was as big as it is now. I am currently serving as the Deputy Executive Director of the board.
So Trina, what was it like when you first became involved in the organization?
It was very small. We were meeting in the room at a UU church. It fit maybe 20 people max, but we never had 20 people. I think the most we had there at the beginning was probably like 10 to 12 people. Everybody knew everybody else. We very rarely had new people, and when we did, we really got excited about it. It was a small and intimate group, but it was really good for trusting the feedback that you were getting from the people you knew who were going through the same types of things that you were. And it was nice to be able to be in a space where you all spoke the same language, because that was the first time I had been part of a poly group, and so for me, it was a wonderful experience.
Ooh. So who was probably next in seniority?
That would probably be me. So I'm Karen Hill. I'm the executive director of the board, and I've been part of PolyColumbus for, gosh, 8.5 years now, I guess. It was still pretty small when I started going, so still had that 10 to 12 number that were coming still at the UU church. And agree with Trina, it was small and intimate. It was definitely exactly what I needed starting into the poly relationships that I was starting into, and that safe place to go, find other people to just be authentic with. And I can't say enough about having that type of support group starting out. So it hadn't grown a whole lot from 11 years to 8 years ago. Kind of status quo for quite a while.
Susan, I think you'd be next in the terms of experience.
Yeah, so I was one of those new people they got really excited to see. So I'm Susan Fulmer, and I'm the treasurer on the board of PolyColumbus. I think I've been coming about 7 years now. It was around this time, it was May or June, when we came, and I found the group when I was Googling. So, we had sort of gotten the non-monogamy ball rolling without any support or anyone to talk to, and that worked for a little while, and then it didn't work anymore, and so we started searching around. And I will never forget that there are two people who aren't here anymore. They've moved cities, but point blank said, "So you're here for PolyColumbus, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're here for PolyColumbus." And I will say I was instrumental in making the move from the 20-person room at the UU Church after I turned to Karen and said, "So there were 45 people here, and that is like, I don't know, 17 over fire code. So maybe we need to think about moving."
Misty, I think you're up next.
Yes, next year will be, I'm Misty Taylor, I'm the secretary of the board, and it'll be 3 years next month that I've been coming to PolyColumbus. So I found it, I've been doing poly for probably 11 plus years when I found the group and said, oh my gosh, there are other people that do this. So it was a huge, like Trina was saying, like just finding people that spoke the same language and finding there were words for things, and like just, talking to people who didn't just assume that any problem you had in your relationship was just based on, oh, well, just don't be poly and you won't have problems. Like, no, that's not the case. So it was really important to me to find this group and watch it grow, and it's been a great 3 years.
Yep. So like I said, I've been in for about the last year and a half. So for the other four of you, what do you think were the most important things that the organization was doing to get to the point where I show up and it's, wow, there's 60 people here every month?
Well, I can answer that. It was really having some support and someone say, hey, you guys can do this. Because Karen and I, people would come and say, oh, we want to do this, and we'd be like, okay, so do it. And it happened once or twice, and then they drifted away. So it was really sort of taking that next step and saying, okay, we're going to commit to do this, and you really saying, let me show you how you start a nonprofit, because the will was there. I think it was just there was, we were balancing a group of 60 people and trying to figure out where to put people, and can we stay at this space? Can we find new space? And everything that everybody wanted to do required money. Well, we don't have any of that. So there were those sorts of things that needed to happen.
Mm-hmm. Other things that were important in the history of the organization, like consistency or anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. I think making sure that we stuck to the one day a month that we were doing it. It's always been on the second Monday of every month. It's always been at the same time from 7 to 9. Although we have switched locations a couple times, that's been the only real big change that we've had. Yeah. And we've had add-tos with new things that are happening and new places and locations for the Poly group to meet as far as outside of the Monday meetings. But the Monday meetings, having that and knowing that you can count on that, I think has been a really good, positive thing for PolyColumbus, that people can always look at their calendar and know that's the Monday.
I know that even in oh, go ahead, Karen.
Nope, you go, Misty.
I was just saying, just in the 3 years that I have been going, like Trina was saying, like people would show up that I hadn't seen in year and a half, 2 years, and they're like, oh yeah, it's still the same time, same same day of the month, and they're it'd be nice to see. It's nice when you see people come back after a while and they still know when to come. So I do think that's important as well.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with the consistency piece, and I think that although we are starting to do a lot of things, our core piece of PolyColumbus is the Monday night meeting and being that support in the community on a consistent basis.
I think we're trying to be consistent with what we're doing new as well. So, for example, the newsletter, it has a consistent issue date, a consistent due date for information to be in there. I think we're trying to pick consistent intervals for Poly 101s or for educational meetings. So I think just in general, our people come to know that when PolyColumbus does something, it's consistent. It'll be well organized and consistent and thoughtfully executed.
Yeah, and I think another thing that helped us out in the beginning, well, actually, when we started the growth spurt, was reaching out to the alternative sexual communities and asking them, can we do a luncheon meeting at your event? Can we represent the poly community and come in and talk to people? And I think that's been a real bonus. We've gotten actively doing poly, but didn't know that they had a resource in the community like us.
Yeah, I think something that was actually instrumental in me getting involved in the group was this broader ecosystem of what's going on in the alternative sexuality or stigmatized sexuality community in Columbus, where Karen and her partners Dan and Dawn are putting on Beyond the Love, this big polyamory conference here in Columbus. And I actually was out of town traveling for work the first weekend that it happened, but I came back and all my friends are talking about it. And they're like, well, you missed it. You got to wait till next year. But there's this PolyColumbus group meeting that is, has a lot of the same people in it, and that's what actually brought me out for the first time to the PolyColumbus meetings, was the word of mouth on Beyond the Love.
Yeah. And I do think having a really welcoming group of people and being able to count on word of mouth has been amazing. But one of the biggest things we've done is meet up, and that has really extended our reach in order to bring in more new people who are interested in what we have to provide.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. I think it's been probably the biggest vehicle to have people find us over the last, well, ever since we started the meetup group, which was probably 3 years ago now, maybe 2 years ago.
I think maybe 2 years.
Yeah, and it's
Great.
just it's brought exponential new members into the group. Um, and I think there was another thing I was going to say that has completely lost my mind, so I'll go back on mute now.
Yeah, I think Meetup was the one thing that a member gifted us, the first subscription, so you have to pay for it. It is a service you have to pay for. And one of our longtime members gifted us the membership, or gifted us a 6 months or a year trial membership. And then, yeah, pretty much that's why we always had no money, because any little bit of money we had over what the rent was, I ferreted it away, or Karen paid for a meetup, or I paid for the subscription, and we just felt like we had to keep it going because it was so instrumental in getting new people to the group.
So let's go ahead and pivot towards, kind of the post-board era of PolyColumbus. Let's talk about kind of the flurry of activity that took place to kind of formalize the organization. And Karen, I'll actually. What do you think has been the most important? Because there's a lot of different paperwork we filed with getting incorporated with the state, having our code of regulations, getting the 501c3 nonprofit. Karen, what do you think is the most important of those?
Well, the most important has been the people that have stepped forward to help do things, because I think Susan mentioned earlier, people over people. I mean, Susan mentioned earlier that there were a lot of things we would have liked to have done with just two of us. We could only do so much of it. And I think the first people that really stepped up were our social committee, of which Misty is a member of. And they consistently were planning events, and we actually had someone doing monthly dinners. That for a good year or so, we had that happening on a consistent basis. So that was probably our first step into saying, oh, maybe there are actually people out there that are willing to help keep this boat afloat. And so we actually started adding staff people. And we had the social team, and then we had a small educational team that we formed. And then Neil breezed into the group and said, hey, you guys should be a 501c. And we're like, okay, help us do that. And so that was probably the next most important thing that we did, was start that process, which then required the formation of the board, of which many of our staff members kind of transitioned into the board of directors. Not all, but several did. So really it was the combination of the people that were willing to put blood, sweat, and energy into the group, and the combination of becoming the 501c, I think, were the two really pivotal pieces.
Well, it's not only the willingness to do the work, but it was the willingness to go public with their poly identity, because we made that sort of a stipulation. You can't be on the board without coming out, and certainly I was not out until I made the decision to come on the board, and then I'm like, okay, this is worthy of doing this. This is a good thing to do. And it's also money. I mean, we set a board financial commitment because the other thing that we weren't often having a lot of was help, and then we had gotten help, but we still didn't have a lot of money. And a lot of the things that we want to do, file legal paperwork, find new meeting space, have a better website, have marketing materials, all of those things cost money. And, passing the hat for a couple bucks at every meeting is not going to cut it.
Normally I'd jump in here, but there's background noise.
So we have background noise. So I think another thing that has been really helpful is the website. It's still a work in progress, but that was an area that we were lacking. Also, was having a solid web presence, and we're still ironing out some of the kinks with hosting a website and having a lot of moving parts, but I think that is going to continue to be very important as we go forward.
Yeah, and the third piece I'll throw in, and Trina touched on this a little bit ago, but it is the partnership with the local community and the events that happen here. Everything from Adventures in Sexuality, of which Trina is a big, huge part of, and the partnership with Beyond the Love, which many of us are a big, huge part of, and also partnership with with local the local swing club who does events on the weekends. So I do think those partnerships have given us an ability to reach out to a large part of the community that might not have found us through other methods.
And I think that's going to be a big thing going forward as well, is reaching out to other areas of the community that may not have been something that we thought would dovetail with us that well, but actually, I think that even reaching out to those like the universities, and trying to be a part of ComFest and getting a booth set up at Pride. I think all of those things and all of the far-reaching things that we have planned in the future are really going to help the organization grow and be a much more viable organization in the future.
And in case he still has background noise, I'll jump in. I'm sure Neil would also throw in our partnership with the secular and humanist community has also been another really large community that we hadn't even begun to tap into prior to a few people joining our group.
Yeah, well, it was interesting for me at the time that I joined is I was like, holy cow, in Columbus there's two different poly networks. There's this PolyColumbus network, and then there's all these people that are poly but are part of the humanist and the rationality community, and there isn't a lot of overlap. And it's like, okay, we got to figure out how we can, bring these groups together. It's like, you people need to hang out with you people, and you people need to hang out with you people. So that's been something I've been really passionate about.
Well, and what I'm kind of excited about is, as the parents of pretty young children, there's finally reaching some critical mass where I feel like we might even be able to have a parent group or certainly times when our kids can socialize where they can maybe talk about things on their own, in their own ways too. Because before, I can remember one meeting distinctly where I and one other person were the only one with children, and the topic was poly parenting and children, and we didn't, no one had a lot to say because we were the only two. So I feel like that's an area that I think we can probably work with too once we reach a certain critical mass.
So why don't we go around the horn and let everybody talk about, in the near future, what they see from PolyColumbus that they're most excited about. And Karen, why don't we start with you?
Okay, so in the near future, I think I'm just most excited about our partnerships with Pride and hopefully ComFest. We're crossing our fingers that we will be able to be a part of ComFest as well. I think that's a big step into a very public way into the community. So I'm really excited to see what comes of that and how well we're received, how many people stop and ask
who's
questions.
not part of Columbus, can you define ComFest?
Sure. ComFest is really kind of short for Community Festival, and it is literally downtown Columbus. It's kind of the hippie vibe. There's bands, there's food. Columbus, it's actually legal to be topless. You'll see topless people walking around as long as they're within the Columbus city limits. So it's really just kind of a very casual vibe that's a lot of fun going on within the city.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things with Poly is that really excites me about the potential for growth is that there's so many people that are doing Poly, but they're not calling it that, or they're not realizing that polyamory is a term that a lot of people use. And so letting those people know that, hey, there are other people that, structure their relationships in a very similar way than you do. Do you want to hang out? And there's going to be a lot of those folks at ComFest, at Pride, and some of the other places we go. So Trina, what is it you're excited about in the near future?
Well, as well as being really excited about Pride and a possibility of being in ComFest, I'm really excited about the educational things that we have coming up. I like that we're doing a consistent study program for people who are new, and we're offering quarterly Poly 101s, and that we have some opportunities to bring in some really big name authors in the future, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how many people come out for these educational events that we're going to be offering.
Susan, let's have you up next.
So I'll be really practical. I'm looking forward to some of the process building being over. I'm looking forward to having the website settled somewhere finally and having it be just the way we want it to be. I'm enjoying sort of the process building so that we are consistent and that we're building a solid foundation. But another part of me is kind of excited that that may be over within the year as well, so that we can focus on more educational events and more fun things. So that's, I'm being practical. I'm also looking forward to when I don't have to worry about the balance in the checkbook so much.
Misty, what do you have for us?
I'm also looking forward to all the potential growth coming up. You know, it's nice to see it getting out kind of in the mainstream. So if you talk to somebody like your coworkers or family, it's more part of the, you know, they've heard the word before, they've heard polyamory, they've heard, they maybe know somebody who's doing the same thing. So the more it gets out there, the more it gets talked about, the less, you know, people will think it's strange, or, you know, they'll at least know somebody who's probably doing it. So that part of it excites me.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, what excites me, and I think this is maybe about a year off for a first draft, but having polygroup in a box where we can say to somebody, or a few somebodies out in Boise, Idaho, assuming there isn't a polyamory meetup group out there, but if they wanted to form a group, hey, here's a sample code of regulations or constitution, whatever it is you want to call it. Here's conflicts of interest policy that we have field tested. Because everybody has all these interconnected relationships, and we've got to approach that in a slightly different way in the polyamory context. But here's all these processes that we've developed, and we figured out what has really worked well, what it is we needed to go back and do a second draft on. But being able to package that up and say, here, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We're going to give you a really good head start, because I want to see poly groups all across the country. Because I feel like that's how we're going to organize, and that's how we continue to get this critical mass of having polyamory not be an alternative lifestyle, but having it be one of several options. So that's what really excites me. So any other thoughts people want to toss out or mention before we put this one into the can?
No other thoughts. Put us in the can.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, everybody. Great time, and look forward to doing it again. Take care.
Good night.
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 Night.